Welcome back, guys. This is Mac Pro in 2020 part 2, specifically the 2006 Mac Pro. So in today's video, what we're going to be doing is pulling apart the machine, cleaning it out a little bit, and putting in some new parts that I got. Now, the previous video wasn't very popular, and I know that because I didn't really push it out anywhere. That's fine, but somebody left a comment anyway that I would like to read. And let me grab my phone here. Sheldon left a comment. Here's a comment on the screen. And he said, or they said, keep your copy of line as you might need it to upgrade the firmware. Yes, we will need to keep it. You know what's up. And then he left another comment stating, update the EFI from 1,1 to 2,1, so upgrade the revision and the firmware to support the newer 8-core chips that we're putting in. He also wrote, upgrade the DDR2 ECC memory to 32 gigs of RAM, and we already did that, so, or no, sorry, we didn't already do that. See, it's been so long I've forgotten. We didn't do that because the machine came with 32 gigs of RAM, so that's already a maxed out spec. Yes, you can go 64 gigs of RAM, but I've seen some info online kind of conflicting based on the speed. There's maybe some issue. I'll leave a link to that, and I'll talk about where you can get the link to that later. But essentially, 32 gigs is more cost effective regardless if you have to buy RAM. He also said install an SSD or EME drive. I'm assuming you meant NVMe, which is PCIe as expansion on here. I don't think we need to do that because A, I don't think the performance is gonna be much of an increase anyway, and B, we're doing this on a budget. So SATA is kind of what we're doing. He also said upgrade the graphics card between Mac flashed or not. Basically what he means, and I explained this in the last video, is the graphics card I have over here is not flashed in a way that it works with Mac, Mac entirely. So basically that graphics card doesn't, when you start your computer, the boot screen, like the white Apple and all that, that doesn't come up on that card. As soon as the system loads in though, then the driver kicks in and then you'll be able to see everything. But like say you had the whole, I don't know, option while you were booting, you're not gonna be able to see, what driver you're trying to boot to. So we do need to flash that card to be compatible. Last thing he said was look for CPUs on eBay, 2 Xeon 5365s. Okay, I didn't look for 5365s after I found out the cost of them. Yes, they give you slightly better performance, but when I compared it in cost for how much they cost right now versus the 5355s, the upgrade didn't seem logical to the 5365s. Now, the 5355s were much cheaper to buy in a pair than trying to hunt down some 5365s for a reasonable price. And again, we're doing this all on a budget, and I'll go over how much I spent on all the parts and everything a little later in the video once we're fully assembled, but that's kind of the rough idea, was to keep this on a budget. I will show you guys all the parts before we put them in though, so you kind of know, the upgrades that I'm looking to do. So for the upgrades on this machine, the reason I took these specific upgrades is that I see this machine having potential in Windows 10 versus 10.11, which is the last unofficially supported version that you can run on this Mac Pro. Apple only lets you run to 10.7, which is Lion, which is too old, too old. So I really see the future of being able to use this machine on Windows 10. Now with these upgrades, that should make it really nice, even with the limitations of the hardware and certain support on the chipset. It may be tricky, but all the software side of like getting it to run Windows 10 and all that will be in a separate video. Now the reason for the software stuff being in a separate video is because I spent countless hours doing research, and I haven't really looked over what I researched before I filmed this, because it's been a few months. It doesn't matter because that separate video is going to go over everything in detail, why things need to be done a certain way, kind of overviewing the whole process in order to get it there. This is just the assembly, kind of rebuild and assemble stage. Last thing I want to note before we get into this is that I am planning on making a GitHub repository on my GitHub, and it's going to be filled with kind of a wiki based thing. I'm not sure. A wiki based thing where you can go and search up each individual project, and I'm going to have like, you know, like a README for that project or something with all the links I'm discussing right now, and maybe, you know, more written information if you're looking to follow this guide for sure, with like kind of with or without the video. So that's my goal, is to get that repository up. I didn't quite do it before filming this video, but I'm looking to create the kind of repository before the software episode of this video comes out, which is yet to be filmed. So I'm going to spend time making that and getting all the resources that I used for this project together. So that way, in our third episode, if you'd like to follow along and you have the same machine, you will be able to go on there, get the same exact links to, you know, the stuff I've been browsing and looking at and using for this project. So it makes your life just a little bit easier, and there's a way to track each project without having to go to the YouTube video and, you know, dig up the links in the description. So I have all the parts laid out on the table. We're gonna go over them a little bit in detail. Not too much, because most of you guys would know most of this stuff. I'm gonna make a very simple explanation on why I chose each part. And then at the end of this video, because I haven't done it yet, is show you guys the price, or kind of give you the rough price of everything, all the parts that I got. But you'll see kind of each individual part, and if you go into the description, you can see the specific parts that I ordered, and you can decide for yourself if you need to order those as well. Okay, so we're over here and we've gathered all the parts together. These two things I don't think I actually have anything in, but I included it anyway. So this is the stuff we're going to be using for the build, the rebuild. This was the SSD that came with the computer. It's only 128 gigs, but I decided to keep it since it's still good anyway. This is the graphics card that we used last time. This is the 5870 Radeon. And I got some thermal compound, just cheap thermal compound. So this is a USB 3.0 5 gigabits per second PCIe expansion card, and it's got, I believe, 7 USB ports. The only downside of this thing is it's not compatible with Mac OS, as far as I can tell, and with the research I did online. It's not plug and play, but that doesn't really bother me, because like I mentioned earlier, the full potential of this machine is truly on Windows at this point, and even potentially Linux if you're into that. I don't mind Linux personally, but I think Windows is the way we're going to go for most users right now for this machine. So I picked up this card, and I think this will do us well. We'll find out. Last, I had an iMac that I disassembled on my, or I had an iMac in for repair, and this hard drive was out of it. It's old, and really I just bunch of extra hard drives laying around for extra storage. So we've covered those things. I'm gonna go ahead and set them on the Mac Pro over here so they're out of the way. I had this caddy, I bought this caddy for 2.5-inch drives, and basically I just put a hard drive in here, and I'm gonna use this, although I didn't include it in the cost. I am going to use this because it may be useful for external storage and whatnot for project files, so I'm going to keep that with me. Another thing I'm going to use for this project is my handy 1.5 terabyte Seagate developer project disk that I have. All my developer files, or my, you know, like software development, playing around files on. So even though this won't be included in the build, I figured it's worth a mention, because if you're doing projects like these, multiple projects with many different machines, you want to be able to keep each specific machine's files somewhere where if the machine dies, you have a backup of it, and on top of that, the setup files. So a very handy thing to keep. Other stuff, including the power cord, some little suction cups, which are for my toolkit. Toolkit's nothing special, we can ignore that. This is just a bracket for if you need to stick it on your SSD to get a little extra height. Flash drive, this, well, I just dropped that case. Anyway, this little case has like USB Bluetooth adapter, stuff like that. So anything that could be handy, like flash drives for this project. Last but not least is this OWC box that I've kept for years for storing MISC parts in. Inside this box is the extra cables. So I had some SATA cables laying around. We're going to use those, maybe. I'm not sure. But I had them in here anyway. This is a 8-pin to 2 6-pin, mini 6-pin. I bought this because we may need it for a graphics card. And same with this one. This is for Mac Pro, big 6-pin to mini 6-pin. Don't remember the exact term for it, but anyway, that's that. Plenty of spare hard drives I can use on this project that I had laying around. I will not include those in the cost because that doesn't make any sense too. We'll set a little bit of that aside. I have a bracket for mounting the SSDs and stuff. Airport card. Now, I needed a newer updated airport card that supported 5 gigahertz networking and all that good stuff. We have that, and we have our CPUs here, ready to go, the 5355s. I'll talk a little bit more about these in the voiceover as I do the install. Some of the extra screws, the drive bracket. This is the adapter for the airport card that we're also going to use. So anyway, that's all of that stuff. I kind of just took it out. This is the box of stuff I've been saving up now for this build, and that's all the stuff we're going to use today. So here I am on the forums, scrolling down and getting the Mac Pro ready to record on the little Blackmagic monitor, and just hooking up accessories right here. All right, and now we're starting to record. There we go, recording. So now you can see me on the Mac Pro open up this recovery disk assistant. This is provided by Apple, so you can use a flash drive to restore Mac OS X 10.7 or Lion. So I was making a recovery disk in the meantime, just so I had a way to restore if I needed to, or if I messed something up. So now back on the iMac, scrolling through the forums. I believe that's the Mac Rumors thread on getting the Mac Pro 2006 to 2007 firmware update tool. So I was just grabbing the resources I needed and making sure I read everything thoroughly so I didn't have any issues. There we go, the recovery tool finished making the flash drive, and now I hooked up the flash drive, or a flash drive, to the Mac Pro so I could copy the tool, the firmware update tool over, which I'm doing now, after I grab a couple of extra things from the Mac Rumors website. So here I'm seeing some commands and some references to if you have errors or problems like that. So I'm just reading up on that and making sure I know what's happening. All right. Flash drive hooked in, and it looks like I am copying the necessary files over. Pasting a link to the Apple firmware download that you need from the Apple site. So now we're here back on the Mac Pro on the flash drive, copied over the firmware update tool and the text file here, which includes a link if you go to it on Safari for the firmware upgrade issues page for 1.1. This also provides you with a link to the Mac Pro EFI firmware update 1.2, which you're going to need. Now, if you look I can't download it on the Mac Pro, so I go back on my iMac and I grab that because Safari is so out of date here that you can't even get a download link to be provided. So I copy it to the flash drive from my iMac and then bring it over to the Mac Pro, so that way I have the DMG. Now I do a little bit of reading, open the DMG, we go and run the firmware update tool. Make sure you have the DMG mounted first. It says firmware procedure is ready to go. So now I just look at those instructions and read up on the form roughly for a little bit just to make sure I'm doing this right. And then now we reboot or shut down and do the procedure of holding the power button. You can read all about that on the forum. Just hold it so you can get into the SMC or firmware update mode, which you guys see now with the Apple logo and the small gray bar at the bottom. This is what you need. Again, I recommend you read the forum post documenting this and also that little warning window when the utility is done with the firmware, because that tells you exactly what's going to happen next and what you need to do. Machine rebooted again, and we're going to go ahead and sign in to, oh, there we are, signed in. All right, now let's go to About This Mac and check. So there we go, just checking the basic thing, go to System Report, and there we go. You can see Mac Pro 2.1. Firmware has been updated to the 2007 Mac Pro, and now we can go ahead and do the CPU upgrades. So I read a couple more things, see what I don't need, remove it, and then now we go to taking apart the Mac Pro. So this is just a time lapse, just taking it apart, pull out the memory risers, get some tools, start unscrewing stuff. I recommend the iFixit guide to tearing this machine down. Now, I'll tell you right now, before you start doing it, obviously you can see I pulled out my phone there to reference the guide and see what I need to disconnect. You need like a 3mm hex key, and if you don't get that, it's going to be impossible to pull out the heat sinks for both CPUs. I also stripped, I think, 2 screws that go where that memory riser case is, partly because even though I had the right size bit on my screwdriver, I just didn't have the right angle and I couldn't provide the right amount of pressure on it to get it to break free, so it's stripped. But anyway, you can see me now working around that limitation. I'm pulling the front fan bit out. By the way, you do need to give that a bit of a yank. There you go, now it's out. I got the heat sinks off, not on camera, and now I'm just cleaning little bits and pieces out. Heat sinks were a pain to get off, but you can see me in the corner of the frame there, cleaning them off to make way for new thermal paste. I also took the Mac Pro at one point outside to an air compressor and lightly got all the dust out, which is something you should do. And then I cleaned out the heat sinks as well. And, you know, the fans and all those bits, just make everything run more efficient, you know, more airflow, and get rid of that dust and dirt that builds up in these machines. So you can see me there suffering with the little hex key there. I think I even cut my hand at one point doing this project, so you can see there's a band-aid on my hand, just because my hand had to fit in such a small space with that little hex key tool I had. Like I said, get the right hex key, it'll save you lots of time. Now you see me trying to work around how to get the second heat sink in and squeeze it in, because I had limited space, and that memory shield, the metal bracket that I couldn't get out, just didn't go. Anyhow, putting everything back in, the fans. I think I did the network card while I was in there at this time. Right here I'm just prepping the SSD little 3D printed tray I've got, hooking everything up. looking over everything, keyboard and mouse, powering on. There you see the red lights. So I'm trying a combination of things to see if I can get the Mac Pro to come back, because it's not even posting or booting to anything or any screen. So there you go. Got my phone out and reading things. There's a guide I have on GitHub, if you look, about the debugging codes and reading about that. So I looked at that, and here we go. Okay. Oh. I'm exhausted. Well, now that we're at this point in the Pro video, it's a good time to let you know that this project has spanned now 1 week. I started working on this a week ago, and I didn't have enough time throughout the normal week to keep going and film. I just spent, what time is it? It's 8:36 p.m. right now, November 27th. And I started this last week, I think on a Friday. I'll look at the footage, I'll put it here. And I upgraded the CPUs. That's the only thing I've gotten down so far. The CPUs, which is pretty depressing. These are the original CPUs. And here's my Blackmagic monitor that I'm using to control this because I don't have an external monitor right now. I think I've just spent 3.5, 4 hours debugging whatever was wrong. Doesn't help I don't have the right tool for this computer either. This little stupid hex key is literally out of my camera bag, and it was the only one that fits the bolts or whatever for the socket for the cooler. The coolers aren't even held in right now by any bolts. They're just pretty much thermal paste and set on there just to get it to run. And it looks like my monitor died, but at least it's running. It wouldn't post. I just stopped filming and tried to figure it out. I had some research online. It's a mess. Yeah, this is a pretty painful process of trying to figure out what is wrong, because it's, oh, CPU, I think it was like over temp, overload. Like, I think the heat sinks were sitting on the processors like too tight, and apparently that's can be a problem. Yeah, so 4 hours of debugging later and learning how to read the diagnostic lights. Yeah, that was very painful. There was a big hammer in the garage, and I was considering going and grabbing that hammer and just ending this whole computer, because honestly, the amount of pain and suffering for pretty much no reason, it was so stupid. But I did manage to find in my new tool kit that I bought a longer hex key. This one is 3mm. Camera probably can't focus that, but 3mm, and that's the one I need to tighten the bolts up. But I got it to boot. Everything seems okay. The Wi-Fi card's in there, but I haven't touched the Wi-Fi card yet. I just unhooked pretty much everything that I could think of while trying to diagnose why it wouldn't boot or why it wouldn't post. So we're here now, we got it. This is unlike any computer I've ever messed with. This is some curse. Thanks, Apple. But on the bright side, at least there's the diagnostic lights, which really helped. But I don't know, I tried a combo of everything. One CPU socket, try to get it to boot, no. And just reseated or whatever the term is. I took the CPUs out and kind of reset them in their spot again. And it seems to be working, so I'm not too sure what that was. I thought it was my China Xeons that had shipped from China. I thought they got messed up or they were poor. Although I did look at them before I installed them, and they were, they've been used probably in more than 3 or 4 machines, or pulled out pretty often out of something. But they're working, so that's a good sign. I will recommend if you do this job, and this is from me right now, I'm not gonna go back and say this later, get yourself a long ass hex key or whatever the tool you need, whether it's a bit end that you can put on an extension or something and shove it in there. Get a really long one, because this is annoying having to take it out, turn it again. Ugh, painful. I should have ordered, or I should have looked into this job a little beforehand and gotten the right tool, and that could save me a lot of disappointment and a lot of frustration. 4 hours later, this is where we are. We finally booted. Now that it's working, I guess I will patch it together. I'm gonna leave it all open and do a little bit more like diagnosis and see if like there's some failure, something doesn't seem right, so then I don't waste my time later. Hopefully there's nothing wrong. It doesn't, well, I mean, it booted, so that's a good sign. It didn't lock up while it booted, which is a common Apple thing. If something's wrong, it'll lock up on startup. Yeah, and then I have to remember how to reassemble this thing. Some of these things, it's already been a week, I don't remember where they go, but anyhow. What I will not do is time-lapse the reassembly. I'll just update you guys when it's all done, because A, this 128 gig card is almost filled, and B, I don't really feel like you need to see reassembly, because once you're at the point of doing that, you pretty much got it if you got to do this job yourself. But yeah, once it's all assembled, that's where we can get to the fun stuff, the software side of things, which will be in the next episode. So I'll come back when it's all assembled.